Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and welcome to our main edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. Eurosceptics are winning in yet another European country. This time it's Austria. Such parties are already in power in Hungary and Slovakia, and they also have strong support in France, Germany, and the Czech Republic. In the case of each of these parties, there are Russian ties in the background. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first up, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Explosions rocked the Ukrainian capital overnight. Marine Le Pen could be barred from politics for 10 years. And he fired a grenade launcher in his own office, Poland's former police chief facing charges. We start off tonight with the Austrian populist Eurosceptic Freedom Party, which has emerged victorious in Sunday's general election. Could this result mean a serious political shakeup for the country? Maybe yes, well, or maybe no. Either the National Conservative Party enters the ruling coalition, which some say is unlikely, or several of the other parties will forge an alliance despite achieving their worst results.
On Sunday, with 29% of the vote, Austria's far-right FPO party won the country's general election.
We have opened the door to a new era. We are now really going to write this new chapter in Austrian history together.
The election results were also a moment of disappointment for the governing Conservative Green coalition, which suffered serious losses. The Conservative OVP scored 26%, 11 percentage points less than in the previous elections, and the Greens got 8%, so 6 percentage points less. Third place went to the Social Democratic Party SPO. The last party to enter the parliament is the Liberal NEOS, with 9% of the vote. This share of votes makes for a variety of coalition options. One option could be a government formed by OVP and SPO, an alliance of conservatives and social democrats, not unusual in Austrian politics. The Greens or the Liberals could also possibly join such a coalition. The victorious FPO forming a coalition with the OVP conservatives is another possible scenario. However, OVP's leader Karl Nehammer says that he is ruling out a coalition with the FPO's current leader.
I have always said that you cannot reasonably and responsibly run a state with Herbert Kickl, a man who believes in conspiracy theories.
This potentially leaves the doors open for an OVP-FPO coalition, but under a different leadership. Such an alliance would have to present a chancellor candidate that would be accepted by President Alexander Van der Bellen, the former leader of the Greens. The far-right FPO party has been on the Austrian political scene since the 1950s. It has been part of ruling coalitions twice, in 1999 and 2017.
Russia has long sought to influence the globe through various means, including disinformation, using energy as a political weapon, and straight military coercion. With the recent Austrian elections and the rise of Eurosceptic Freedom Party, the Kremlin's influence in politics in the heart of Europe is on full display.
An Austrian classic, the waltz. Though usually seen at balls and operas, it is also one of the ways through which Vladimir Putin likes to keep his friends close, one step at a time. Austria's former foreign minister, Karin Kneißl, danced with Putin at her wedding in 2018. Now she lives in Russia, an awkward reality for the country's reputation. She was nominated by the Freedom Party, and on Sunday's parliamentary election, the party surged to first place under its leader Herbert Kickl, the same party that nominated Kneißl and at the same party that has expressed anti-European and pro-Kremlin sentiments.
Russian influence, of course, increases as a result of this electoral victory because many of the FPÖ's positions are positions that are highly welcomed by Russia, that relates, for example, to the FPÖ's position vis-à-vis the European Union. So FPÖ wants to weaken the European Union, and Russia is quite happy about seeing a weakening of the European Union.
The strong performance of far-right groups like the Freedom Party isn't limited to just Austria. The recent wins of the Czech opposition party ANO in regional elections under Babiš show a wider trend.
That becomes a black bloc in the center of Europe, which I would argue is bigger than the sum of its parts. It starts to have a significant influence both in Strasbourg and in Brussels.
In Germany, where the local success of another populist party, the AfD, has raised alarms, lawmakers are divided over how to proceed, with some MPs in Berlin lobbying for an outright ban. Yet such drastic action is not the way to go, according to some experts in the region.
There will have to be a way to reach out to those voters and to bring them back to support liberal democracy. Otherwise, in the long run, liberal democracy cannot survive. I mean, it always will require support by voters. You can ban one party, but then another one pops up. And if there is this discontent in the population, you need to somehow find ways of resolving this discontent.
Other populists from around the region, including Poland's President Andrzej Duda, are already celebrating. An example of this is when they gathered this past weekend at former Czech President Miloš Zeman's birthday, a man who has been known for his populist position. A closer look at the guest list reveals leaders who share one thing in common beyond their affinity for frosting, and that's unfreezing the EU's relationship with Vladimir Putin. Among the guests, Slovakia's Fico and Pellegrini, Hungary's Orbán, as well as China's ambassador to the Czech Republic, Feng Bao. Despite the fact that Poland's head of state, President Duda, attending the event, and to his embarrassment wasn't recognized by the host, and on top of that received a sharp rebuke from Warsaw's chief diplomat, Foreign Minister Sikorski. Now the waltz with Putin may continue for the Eurosceptics and populists, but the initial sugar rush may not be enough for a long-term run.
Marine Le Pen on the trial of her political life. The longtime leader of France's far-right national rally finds herself at the center of a political storm, facing serious allegations of misappropriating European Union funds. With investigations stretching back nearly a decade, this trial could carry devastating consequences for Le Pen, potentially barring her from public office for up to 10 years. As the case unfolds, her political future hangs in the balance.
Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Rally Party, appeared in court to address allegations of misappropriating millions of euros from European Parliament funds. Le Pen, who has denied the accusations, argues that the funds were used appropriately and that the charges are politically motivated.
I approach this trial with great serenity. We have an enormous number of arguments to develop in defense of what I believe to be the parliamentary freedom, which is at stake in this case.
During the proceedings, prosecutors outlined evidence suggesting that Le Pen's team created fake employment contracts for assistants who did not actually work for the party. The European Parliament has estimated the damage at 3.5 million euros.
It is something which is not really exceptional. Even a former president, late President Jacques Chirac, was accused for fictive financement of his own party in the past.
Apart from Le Pen, 25 other members of her party appeared facing the same charges. Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who founded the National Front, which later became the RN, is also facing charges and will not attend trial because of poor health. If convicted, Le Pen could face significant fines and potential imprisonment, complicating her political future ahead of upcoming elections.
Today is the 950th day of Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine. Kyiv has been repeatedly attacked by waves of Russian drones. The Ukrainian capital's air defense systems repelled these attacks for several hours. We'll now move to Kyiv, where our correspondent Oz Chatterjee is. Good evening, Oz. Now, did you witness these attacks, and what was the night like under Russian fire?
Good evening. Yes, I was kept awake most of the night. Periodic explosions ringing out throughout central Kyiv. As we believe the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense said, 73 Shahed drones were launched across the country, 67 of those being intercepted. I expect a grand many of those happened over the Kyiv area, at least within audible distance from central Kyiv, where we're based here. So there's another milestone, 950 days in the war. Today is the first month, September, where Russia has launched Shahed drone attacks across the entirety of the month. So every 30 days of this month, Russia launched Shahed drones across Ukraine at a total of 1,339 Shahed drones launched by Russia, of which over 1,100 were intercepted. But still, that's still a good proportion of them making their way through and hitting targets here in Ukraine. So another busy night last night. The Ukrainian air defense will be hoping for some respite at least tonight. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Oz Chatterjee reporting for us there from Kyiv. Thank you very much. Hope you get some sleep tonight and stay safe. Polish authorities are currently evaluating the extensive damage caused by the devastating September floods. In response, the Polish Climate Ministry has proposed projects worth €300 million to improve and develop new water infrastructure and restore rivers to their natural state. But with rising concerns about the unpredictability of extreme weather events, the question remains, will this be enough to safeguard Poland's future? Here's more.
As temperatures across Poland are falling, many of those who have been affected by the recent floods are facing a dilemma: whether to rebuild their homes before winter.
A great deal of work is going on to assess the condition of the buildings on the one hand, because these are hundreds of damaged buildings, so it takes time. But of course, we want these evacuated residents to return to their homes as soon as possible. Safety is, however, the most important thing here.
Not only private property was damaged by the floods. Rebuilding water management infrastructure will cost €750 million. Rail infrastructure 200, and state roads will need an additional €120 million. Local governments are still assessing the damage.
The first children from Lewin Brzeski, a municipality hit hard by the floods, have just arrived in Gdów as part of the cooperation between local governments. More than 100 children can already live in better conditions, learn and recuperate after what they've been put through during the floods.
A dialysis station in Nysa has resumed operations today and is accepting patients. But the city hospital, which was severely flooded, has not been reopened.
We say we should work both on diminishing the hazard, this amount of water which comes, but also trying to avoid the losses by different measures which are on ground in valleys.
One such investment, the reservoir in Racibórz, slowed down a wave of floodwater coming from the Czech Republic. The investment, which was finished in 2020, saved towns and cities downstream the Oder River, among them Poland's third largest city, Wrocław. The threat of flooding is not, however, over. High water on the Oder is approaching the city of Szczecin, not far from the river's mouth. Minor flooding is occurring on both the Polish and German riverbanks. Reconstructing the areas damaged by the floods is a priority for the Polish government. How it handles this crisis could influence next year's presidential election.
Dariusz Barski appeared on Monday in front of the National Prosecutor's Office in Warsaw, but he was not let in. According to him, he should be allowed to perform his duties because he is the national prosecutor. And the Minister of Justice, though, he has a very different opinion and claims that his appointment was not done in the proper legal manner. The legal chaos in the judiciary here in Poland is deepening.
Dariusz Barski was prevented from entering the National Public Prosecutor's Office in Warsaw today. He wanted to resume his function in accordance with a recent Supreme Court verdict, stating he is still legally in office. The government disputes the legality of the decision, arguing that the Supreme Court judges who issued it were also chosen in violation of the law, and therefore their verdicts are null and void.
There is no doubt that the only national public prosecutor is Dariusz Korneluk. This is beyond any argument, and the recent decision, which I cannot call a verdict, of 3 neo-judges of the Supreme Court does not change this fact. There is no dispute here, there are only emotions that the other side is trying to use.
Barski served as state prosecutor between 2022 and 2024. The new government, sworn in December 2023, argued that Barski was given the position in a manner that violated the law and therefore could not continue. The new Justice Minister, Adam Bodnar, announced that he was no longer in office and that a new prosecutor would take over his duties. On Friday, the Supreme Court issued a verdict stating that Barski's position was given to him in accordance with the law and that the Minister of Justice did not have the authority to remove him, so Barski is still in office. Minister Bodnar has openly declared the decision is null and void, prompting harsh criticism from the opposition Law and Justice Party, which was in power until December 2023.
We are witnessing a violation of the law, of the rule of law. There is no such thing as a neo-judge, and the decision of the Supreme Court is binding. We know that today a crime has been committed, the crime of trying to forcibly remove the National Public Prosecutor Barski from his office.
The conflict over Poland's judicial system is expected to last at least until next summer, when the next president is to be sworn in.
It's very difficult to say in a few words about the root of the problem, but it's easy to say how to repair the justice system here. We need president who will not veto the reforms that are needed to finish up this dualism that's critically bad for the society.
The complex nature of the conflict over the Polish justice system makes it even more difficult to resolve.
After firing a grenade launcher in his own office 2 years ago, the former head of the Polish police, General Jarosław Szymczyk, was charged today over the incident. Despite being Poland's former police chief, Szymczyk claims he does not understand the charges and has failed to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty.
In December 2022, an explosion rocked the building of the national headquarters of the Polish police. An anti-tank rocket launcher was discharged within the building by the then Commander-in-Chief of the police, General Jarosław Szymczyk. 2 people were injured in the incident. Today, the general was charged in connection with the incident.
2 charges have been announced today. The first charge is the possession without a license of a weapon, namely a handheld anti-tank recoilless RGW-90 launcher, which was acquired within Ukraine and then transported to Poland without notifying relevant services.
The launcher was given to the general as a gift during an official visit to Ukraine. Ukrainian officials reportedly told him that the single-use launcher was already spent and thus posed no danger. This turned out to not be true. The rocket launcher was live, but safety systems prevented the warhead from detonating. Were it not for these advanced safety features, the general would have most likely been killed, along with a number of people present in the same building.
The second charge is unintentionally threatening the life and health of a number of people, as well as threatening the property of significant worth, namely the National Police Headquarters in Warsaw.
The general has said he does not understand the charges and refused to submit a plea. He also demanded that the relevant interior minister grant permission to interview him. The possession charge carries with it a possible sentence of up to 8 years in prison, while the endangerment one up to 5 years.
The United Kingdom has become the world's first major economy to phase out coal-fired power plants. The move comes ahead as part of the country's broader strategy to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
Monday, September 30th, is the final day the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station will be in operation, having fed power to the UK's electricity grid for nearly 60 years.
Well, it's such a shame, really, when it's been here for such a long time. You know, it's like part of the family, isn't it?
Located in central England, the power plant is the 13th coal-fired power plant to close in the UK over the past 12 years. However, the closure is more of a symbolic move. Last year, coal-fired power accounted for only 1% of the UK's energy mix, down from 80% in the early 1980s.
After so many years, in 2024, coal is not important in energy generation. It is not a social issue because of a long-term policy of quitting coal addiction. It was a long process, it was costly, but it is reaching its final phase.
While the UK has now ceased producing electricity from the biggest polluter, the next step is to quit fossil fuels altogether.
The UK is taking climate change as a matter of great importance, and also that this is only the first step. So we've got rid of coal, but we now need to get rid of oil and gas.
By 2035, the UK is planning to decarbonise power generation, and become carbon neutral 15 years later.
Freedom Party achieved a historic win in Austria's national parliamentary elections over the weekend, becoming the first far-right party to do so since World War II. This was largely due to voter concerns over immigration, inflation, and the war in Ukraine. Despite finishing with 29.2% of the vote, forming a government is still uncertain, as rivals have refused to join in a coalition with the Eurosceptic party. The governing Austrian People's Party finished second, while the Social Democrats placed third, and the ruling coalition between the Conservatives and the Greens lost its majority. The Freedom Party's leader, Herbert Knickel, aims to be the chancellor, but his path to power is unclear without coalition support. The party's platform focuses on restrictive immigration policies, opposing sanctions on Russia, and criticizing EU leadership. And now, here to break down this most recent development in a European country, which again favors the far right, is Professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of Vienna, Heinz Gartner. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening.
So what are some of the possible scenarios for putting together a ruling coalition? Conservatives and Freedom Party had a coalition which crashed. So how much of their policies could survive, and what are the scenarios that we could be looking at?
Of course, there are several possibilities, and it's difficult to exclude the Freedom Party. One possibility is that the People's Party, which was in government so far, will form a coalition with the Freedom Party, but they do not want to do it with the head of the Freedom Party, Herbert Kickl. So it will be difficult since Herbert Kickl claims the chancellery. Another possibility to exclude the Freedom Party would be a coalition between the People's Party, the Social Democratic Party, which already have a very slight majority, but it's only one mandate. They might take in another party, that means the small party Neos or the Greens, but I think the Neos are preferred. But it depends, of course, on the president. He is the one who can confirm the chancellor and the minister. And he also can reject one suggested chancellor, and he already alluded that he would not accept Herbert Kickl.
So this looks like it will take some time to play out. How long do you think that it's going to be before a coalition gets put together?
It might be several months. Probably by the end of the year, we might have a government. But it will be very difficult also when it comes to issues like migration, inflation, climate change, also war in Ukraine, even so that doesn't have a high priority among Austrian voters.
Now, if the Freedom Party is brought into a coalition, could this have any impact on the balance of power in the European Union?
No, I don't think that much, because the right-wing wave is already in the upswing. So, and the Freedom Party is rather part of the trend and not cause of the trend. So it will not change that much. And even so, it is not really clear which group of the right-wing parties the Freedom Party might join. So as far as I can guess now, it will rather join the Meloni streak of the right-wing parties and not the one of the right-wing ADF. Even so, I think there is some split within the Freedom Party, and I do not exclude, if the Freedom Party will be in government, they might split as they did when there was in previous governments.
Now, the Patriots of Europe alliance, brought together by Viktor Orban, of course, of Hungary, Babiš of Czech Republic, and Kickl, and it has an element of peace with Russia in it. And these leaders are all for lifting sanctions against Russia and withdrawing support for Ukraine. Are we seeing Russian sympathizers gain more and more traction across Europe?
I can speak about the Freedom Party, and I guess once they're in government, they grudgingly will swallow the continuation of aid to Ukraine. But of course, they will exploit the argument, as you say, that sanctions do not work. And this, of course, is correct, because sanctions did not end the war. Of course, the Freedom Party will exploit this argument for propaganda.
Well, is Austria in particular losing out a lot due to these sanctions that are not, say, the best enforced, really truly enforced?
But Austria has a high percentage of humanitarian aid for Ukraine. So, of course, Austria is a neutral state and is not allowed to deliver directly weapons to Ukraine, what it doesn't, but it does it through the European Union, because it pays for the European Union, and the European Union delivers weapons. But Austria is one of the countries which the highest percentage for humanitarian aid.
Right, but is Austria losing out to the sanctions that have been imposed against Russia?
It's hard to say. Austria still imports 70–80% of gas from Russia. It's hard to cancel them. So I don't think that the Austrian economy is really suffering because of the sanctions that much. But it is hard to tell, because there would be several branches. Banks have some difficulties now because they have to stop their business with Russia, and it's difficult for them to withdraw from Russia immediately because they have their business there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Austria has long had a close Moscow ties, actually for centuries, whether they be business, political, or both. Why do you think this exactly is, and is there a potential that this could ever change?
Of course, it's changing, and Austria has a new security strategy. It is changed it from the old one from 2013, just because of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. In the 2013 security strategy, that was mentioned as a strategic partner. Now it's mentioned as a threat. So this changed, but of course we cannot forget, of course, that Russia was among the victory powers after the Second World War, which liberated Austria as well. Of course, then Austria got its neutrality, and the Soviet troops would leave. But this historical relationship goes back a century. It has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine.
The Freedom Party in Austria, Germany's AfD and BSW even, France's National Rally, they're all sympathetic to the Kremlin. Is this Russian influence at its best? How can these players influence the debate on assistance to Ukraine?
There is, of course, is a debate on in disguise, because they call the relations with Moscow as peace negotiations, which may be not that serious. And of course, everybody wants peace now, and these right-wing parties want to be on the front of the new peace debate on the negotiations. And they would say, we said it all along. They might exploit the situation of war. And we might have some negotiations in the future, and if the right-wing parties claim that will be their success, but it's not true, of course.
Mm-hmm. Heinz Gardner, a political science professor at the University of Vienna, thank you very much for being my guest tonight and talking about these very important topics. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.